The most difficult thing I ever had to find after I lost it was myself. Let's get into it. Hey, welcome to the prompt where curiosity might have killed the cat, but it won't kill the conversation. Let's get into it tonight. I want to talk to you about lost, found, and becoming, my identity crisis. And I hope that this will be something that will resonate with you, something that you can grab hold of, something that you can digest and relate to as I share how I went through identity crisis in life and how I regained my true identity. And let me tell you this, spoiler alert, it's an ongoing process. All right. So let's get into this. I want to talk to you first about who I was. And who I was is very different than who I am today. Who I was, if I go all the way back, was a very scared, timid, introverted, weird young man, right? As a kid, I was actually bullied, and later in life, in some areas, I became a bully. But I was bullied, and I would run from one of my tormentors off of the bus, and I remember his name, know what he looks like, all of that. Won't get into it in terms of identifying him, but I'll tell you a story about that scared, introverted, shy young man who was afraid of his own shadow. If I'm keeping it a buck, like I was so afraid, I used to wet the bed. I think I wet the bed all the way up until probably 8, 9 years old. It got less and less frequent as I grew up, but that was me. And man, I had this bully that I had these Hot Wheel cars that my stepdad's mom had given me, and I had a bunch of them. And I would take some to school from here and there. And this bully that on the bus, he would take my Hot Wheels. He like, I like that one, and he'd just take whichever one he wanted. And I dealt with that for quite a while. Um, I didn't tell anybody. I was afraid. And sometimes a good friend of mine who was more of a fighter would kind of keep him off of me because he didn't really want to deal with that friend. But for the most part, I had to, in order to keep from getting beat up, I had to give up my cars. Well, one day, my friend that kind of defended me wasn't on the call. He wasn't on the bus that day. And because he wasn't on the bus, it was that day he decided he was going to take a couple of cars. And I got off the bus on that day and I told him, I left my cars at home. I got to go home and get them. And then I'll come back with the car. And I went, he said, all right, I'm gonna wait right here. Cause we got off like at this bus stop at a stop sign. I went to the house. I ain't never come back out. I didn't come back outside till the next day. They stayed further down the road. So when I got on the bus the next morning, he said, I'm gonna get you after school. I'm gonna get you. You better have my cars. And I had a decision to make. That scared, timid, introverted, shy, wet to bed little boy had a decision to make. At what point do I stand up for myself? Because again, my friend wasn't there. So I dreaded the whole day, went throughout the entire day, dreading the end of the day because I've either got to give up my cards or I've got to defend myself and I may lose. This was kind of rough, scrapping kid. We were the same age, but he just came up different. And so when we got off the bus, He got off for me. He was ahead of me, and he was waiting. And he gave me my ultimatum: you gonna give up these cars, or you gonna do something? You finna get your tail whooped. And before I knew it, I knelt down, and there was this rusty tin can that had been flattened out. It's like a old green bean can or something, had been flattened out. And I grabbed that can and I threw it like a ninja star, because I was in the ninja stars back then. I threw it. And man, that little tin can went. And right as I was releasing it, there's this older guy. He had like a red, either Camaro or Chevy Surveil or something, but it was one of those old style muscle cars. And it had a real nice paint job on it. And he said, "Don't hit my car," right as I'm releasing it. And man, that can went cut across his ear. And that boy screamed like a stuck pig. And he ran. And the can didn't hit the guy's car. And I ran to the house. But guess what? I didn't have any more issues with him. I stood up for myself. And it gave me a little bit of boldness, right? But it started to make me become, or pull me out of who I was to who I was going to become. So in that time, what I didn't tell you is I'd moved from where I was originally from. I moved from where I was originally from to move to Florida, and then back, and then to Florida again. So this happened on that second time to back to Florida. So now I've defended myself. And that's when kind of the bully came out, because I was in the school that was predominantly white, and kind of some of the black kids were kind of feared. And I started to play up on that. I'm going to defend myself. Y'all ain't gonna bully me. And I started becoming that guy. But that's not who I fully became. That's not who I fully became. That's who I was. Because even though I got this sense of courage in that moment, I still was the introverted, weird, to myself, shy, pee in the bed little boy. That's who I was. But I was starting to come into my own. Now, fast forward to my teenage years. I'm the ugly duckling. That's how I felt about myself. I wasn't real popular with the girls like a lot of my friends were. And so because I wasn't really popular with the girls or with the ladies, I didn't get to go out and do the things a lot of times that the guys were doing. And back then, they went in the woods to hunch. And I ain't never had no hunting partner, because I wasn't the guy that females wanted. Even when I was a young teenager, I was very much a romantic. I was very much into giving and showing what I thought I saw on TV and being loving and all that. And this is what I learned around age 15. Them chicks ain't want none of that. They wanted absolutely none of that. That's not who they wanted. I won't get into a couple of stories, but in uncertain terms, even when I did have some girlfriends, they felt I was too slow, because I wasn't pressing them for sex like they were used to teenage boys doing. And it's just, I was raised different. I told you I was different. My brother to this day reminds me of that. But I was different. And so I couldn't pull the girls. When Andre 3000 does in this one song, I think it's called Growing Old, he says, "I bet you never heard of a player with no game, told the truth to get what I want, but shot it with no shame." He wrote that for me. He did. He wrote that verse for me. I had zero game. When I got my wife, zero game. I'm just not a game guy. I didn't have that smooth talk, that smooth approach line. Most of the ladies that, as I grew and matured and kind of grew out of that ugly duckling phase, most of the young ladies I got was just me just shooting straight truth, just me being me. One of my favorite things when I would sit down and talk to a young lady, I'd be like, "Hey, what are your dreams? Where you want to go?" And they were so unused to a guy actually caring about what they thought about their future, that it will open up that conversation. And as one of my homeboys used to say, he say, if you listen to him long enough, he gonna convince you. So we would get into this great conversations, and usually that led to young ladies liking me. In high school, I feel like in my senior year, I ran a counseling service in the library. I didn't actually run one, but it seemed like, hey, I had free time. I'm in the library. I always had young ladies wanting to come talk to me, not necessarily to be with me, but to just, I gave relationship advice. I've been doing this since I was probably 6, 7 years old. Nah, not 6, 7 years old. Since I was in middle school. I say I've been coaching relationships at my age and above my age since I was in middle school. Let's say it that way. Um, so when I'm in high school, the other thing that I learned, and this stuck with me from age 15 till about age 20, 21, is that they wanted a roughneck. They wanted a thug. They wanted someone that at least had that image. So who I was, that shy, introverted, intimidated, um, sh- piss in the bed little boy, became this thug. I had the image of it. Wasn't who I was at my core. So I went from who I was to who I became. I became this thug. And I did have the opportunity to run and to be around all of the elements. So I understand the game. I understand the streets. I understand a whole bunch of stuff. But luckily for me, and thanks be to God, I had people around me that saw much more of me and they cared so much for me. They let me get close enough to learn about it, but not close enough to mess up my future. And I'm grateful to them for that. To this day, I feel like when I become a millionaire, I gotta, like, really, I owe them because they wouldn't allow me to get myself in trouble. But I learned a lot and I picked up a lot of street smarts, because I had to give this image. So it had to be authentic, and that's what they wanted. And it worked so well to the point that when I was a senior in high school, there were grown women who had heard about me that came out to the high school. And when I say grown, I'm 18, 19. They're, in their mid 20s, early 30s, and wanting to go out on dates and wanting to get down, what I'm talking about. They're paying for motel rooms for us to get down, what have you, because they saw this thug. Um, is around that time probably that I really started to lose me, because all of a sudden the persona that I slid on was not the same person who I know I'm meant to be, right? So we're talking about becoming, and or who I was and who I became. But it at some point you start to blur the line. And let me tell you what happened when I say we blurred the line. So had a situation when I first started dating my wife, and I was in her car in my hometown, and for some reason I was really agitated. My brother got locked up. A lot of my friends, in fact, that I was really close and ran streets with, they were going to prison, different things, and I felt very, very alone. And so I was down hanging out, and um legit came up talking some trash for some reason. I don't even remember the reason. And legit came up, and when he came up, he just talking some trash. I'm like, man, go on, bro. I ain't got time for that, man. Leave, just step back. Legit just kept pressing me. And I was good. And then I said something flip to him. So legit, like, oh, you think I care about it because you in your B car or whatever. I said, oh, bro, what we're not gonna do is talk about my woman. She ain't here. She ain't got nothing to do with this. Oh, I say whatever I want to say about that B and blah blah blah. I said, oh yeah. And before I knew it, I pulled out 40 caliber Glock, pointed it at him. And one of my friends, like, whoa, 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 call me by my nickname. He say, man, don't do it. Please, please don't do it. Please don't do it. And I don't even know, just mentally, I was so lost. I I didn't know, where I was as far as like my mindset and kind of how I was feeling in that moment. And the young man really just he didn't realize like that was the wrong day. It's kind of Tupac, you effing with the wrong brother on that day. And my friend stepped in between. He said, please don't do it. Don't do it. And he was willing to step in between. And I eventually pulled the gun down. Now, there's two reasons I didn't fire. One, my friend was there. Two, I knew that there was a piece on the gun that had been broken down and put back together, and I wasn't certain if that piece would hold up if I squeezed that trigger. So it could have ended up hurting me. So that night, on the way back home, I took the gun, threw it into a river, on my way back home to where I was living at the time. And I just stopped hanging out. I just stopped hanging out because I realized I was in a very bad headspace. So I would just go working home, hang out with my girlfriend, who is now my wife, visit my, um, no, that was way before my son, good little bit before my son was born. But it was just, that was it. That's who I had become. I was I had listened to Tupac, who was one of my favorite artists, so much that I believe I would be dead at 25. I listened for so much that I was going to be dead or in prison. I was going to go be right where my friends were. That's just my mindset. I had lost my way. Now I have to talk to you about the power of blood, because I have to talk to you about my father and how, even though my father didn't raise me, I very much had some of his identity. So, different story, different video. So I started getting out the streets. Me and my wife, we eventually got married. I think we got married inside of 6 to 8 months of meeting each other. Now I'm back in the church because I was raised in the church. I preached my first sermon at 15. My brother and I used to teach Sunday school. We did a lot, and so that was my thing. That was my thing. So I knew the Lord. It's time to get back to it. Matter of fact, the sermon, my deliverance sermon, my sermon of salvation that said it's time, was actually the song Crazy by Tupac on the Machiavelli album, the 7 Day Theory. Uh, so I listened to that song. It spoke to me. It's like, you gotta get out of this way of thinking. So I got out of that way of thinking. And what happened? What happened? From that point until I'm 48, till about 35 or so, I had lost myself. I was just fulfilling roles, but not intentionally living. I was more letting life happen to me than me actually happening to life. Now, here's the thing about that. Even though that was the case, I was still being successful. When my wife met me, I was making like $6.42 an hour. I've told you that in a different video. But my career had this upwards trajectory, which give all credit and praise to God. And just, he always put the right people around me to help me grow and progress. And so, who have I become? Who have I become since then, since 35? Before I tell you who I've become, let me tell you how I didn't become him. So a lot of times, as I grew up, as you can tell, kind of with my, who I was and who I became and who I am now. So before I tell you who I am now, um, I was really a people pleaser, whether it was to preserve myself because I didn't want to get beat up, or whether it was to fit in, whatever. I was this people pleaser. And shaking the addiction of pleasing people can be very, very difficult. Even to this day, there's some times that I behave or carry myself in a way, or I don't stay true to myself in a moment because I don't want to upset someone. And it's like that's still an artifact to my mind of people pleasing. So here it is. What I didn't do is when I would talk to people and like, man, I feel like I'm trying to find myself. And their thing was, man, forget them people, right? Man, you guys just got to know how to not to care, how not to care. And I was like, that's not good for me. And here's why it's not good for me, why I couldn't use that approach. And that might work for you, but why I couldn't use the I don't give a crap approach, I don't care about what people think about me approach, is because I do care about what people think about me to a certain degree. But my I don't care, my I don't give a dang, my I don't give a F, my not caring is not good for anyone. Here's the one thing I know about me is there was a very dark side to me. One that, if awakened, was very destructive. He showed up on occasion as a kid. My auntie asked me one time, she's like, what happened to that anger you used to have? And I don't have that anger anymore. It is something that is under control or at rest. But part of the reason that's at rest is I have to be mindful of the things that feed it. So going into a I don't give a F mentality will feed that particular beast, and that's not good for anyone. One of my nicknames I accepted because I understood the darkness. The I understood who I could be if provoked, and that wasn't good for anyone. So I couldn't take that approach. So what did I do? What I did was I learned to reconnect with who I originally was. Not the scared guy, not the guy pissing in the bed, obviously. Not that, but I learned to be okay with my own company. And see, when I was a young boy and I was that introvert, shy guy, I was okay with my own company. If they didn't always invite me to be in, I was okay with that. So I learned how to be at peace with my own company. Until this day, I'll even have people say, "How I see you go to Starbucks, and what do you do when you go in there?" I'm like, "I'm drinking coffee, and I might get on my laptop and work on some stuff." And you just sit there for hours. I couldn't just sit there by myself for hours. I have to talk to somebody. I was like, I don't. I'm good company, and I'm okay with being the company for me. So I learned how to reconnect with my inner self, the inner healthy part of me. And I would submit to you that some of you are in identity crisis even now because you have not learned how to be okay with your own company, how to just be able to sit with your thoughts peacefully, let them flow through your mind, process them without having this physiological reaction to them, without overthinking. And I was a bad overthinker, and every now and again it visits me again. But how do I do that? How do I be okay with my own company? How am I with me? Because if I'm not okay with me, I'm never going to be okay with anybody else. If I'm not at comfort and at peace with me, I'm never going to be okay with someone else. It's just not going to happen, right? And if it does, you're going to fake it. I'll give you this last story. And this is what I think triggered me onto that journey towards authentic Damon. It was this. um, I went on this trip, business trip. And when I went down to the business trip, it is when I went on this business trip, we went to this organization, matter of fact, named Circle of One Marketing. And I remember, because I had existed in a corporate, buttoned up environment for a number of years. And I remember walking in the diversity that was in the room. And not only was there diversity in the room, they were comfortable in their own skin in what was potentially going to be a multi-million dollar deal that we're there to discuss, at least $1 million or $2 million deal. And they walked in comfortable in their own skin, confident in who they were and what they had to offer. And I said, it must be nice to show up as your authentic self every day. It must be nice not to have the code switch. It must be nice. That's why even now, since I left my corporate job, most of the time when people see me, I'm in a hoodie, shorts. I got on a ball cap like I got now. And I'm not even, sometimes I have on my gold chains. And even now, I'm not. It's like, hey, y'all ain't used to seeing me like this, or what you might even consider thugged out. It doesn't matter. I got on the J's or whatever, but I'm dressed nice and I'm okay being my authentic self. And if you don't want to do business with me because you don't want my authenticity, I know how to show up in khakis and a nice blazer, right? Not stupid, but I'm gonna be authentically me. I might be in those khakis and a nice blazer, but I still may have on some low or mid Jordans, right? And it's gonna look nice. I learned to show up as me. Here's the question that I have for you. Are you okay showing up as you? Are you showing up as you? Do you find yourself to be good company? I want to encourage you to go back and look at who you were, who you became, and ask yourself, am I who I want to be? Because I'm who I want to be. And that's Damon Rich, the relationship GPT. And I want you to remember, upset the algorithm, heal, reflect, and connect. And I'll see you on the next video. God bless.